Hey, what's up everyone? And well, talking about movies once again of 2023, and this time it's the most underrated ones, the underdog films, the ones that I think are the most underappreciated, at least in my opinion, people. So bear that in mind. But anyway, without further ado, here we go. Top 10 movies that I think are the most underrated of 2023, starting with number 10, The Boogeyman. Yes, based off the Stephen King novel of the same name, and I was hyped to see this one, and I wasn't thoroughly as disappointed as everybody says it was. It was getting a rather mixed reception due to overuse of jump scares, being PG-13 rated, and some people said it dragged on at some parts, even for an hour and a half runtime, and I agree with that. It does revolve around more about the family, how, they lost their mother, and all the dramatic moments and everything like that. You got the bully, of course, who, picks on the older sister, and of course the younger sister who's dealing with her problems and everything like that. But when it gets to the scary parts, it's actually very good and effective. Yeah, it suffers from typical cliches and jump scares and everything like that. But when it gets scary, it gets scary. Maybe a little too dark at some parts, but I think it's worth at least one watch if you're into this kind of stuff that makes you afraid of turning off the lights at night. So, definitely one you want to be cautious with letting kids watch, especially, even for a PG-13 rated horror film. May not be the best Stephen King adaptation, but it's far from the worst. Number 9, Gran Turismo. Yeah, based loosely off of the video game franchise and supposedly based on a true story, and I don't know how accurate it is to the real story, but all I know is it carries the name Gran Turismo of the video game franchise, and it's about, a teenager who's into that gaming franchise, is an avid gamer, who's offered the opportunity of a lifetime to become a real-life race car driver, despite all odds against him, which in my opinion is very believable. I mean, a video gamer against real-life racers? Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous, but it works. And thanks to a star-studded cast of actors alongside our main lead character, like Orlando Bloom and Stranger Things David Harbour, they definitely carry the movie. Yeah, it's not a racing movie masterpiece like Rush or Ford vs. Ferrari, but it's just as entertaining, and it has a pretty kick-ass soundtrack with some Black Sabbath. I mean, that to me is plenty enough to keep it rockin', wouldn't you say? So, for a movie with the video game name of Gran Turismo, even though I've never actually played this franchise, and with the awesome PlayStation sound effects, it's plenty enough to show that video game movies don't always suck. And this one is definitely one of the better ones. Number 8, Super Mario Bros. Yeah, that's right, from one video game-based movie to another, they were definitely on a roll this year, at least in my opinion, and Universal, I gotta say, has dominated the box office this year compared to Disney, who's really struggled badly. Whether you look at it with their animated movies or live-action films, Universal has really become their daddy, I guess you could say. And this movie was one of the highest grossing and obviously my most anticipated, one that I did a review on already. I don't have to explain very much, but to keep it short, sweet, to the point, I was not a fan of the 1993 live-action film. I understand it has its fan base and cult following, but it was just not my cup of tea. So I was looking for something much more faithful to the source material, which I could definitely see worked out much better in animated form, and with Illumination, Universal, they nailed it. For the most part. The animation is gorgeous. Okay, you could criticize some of the voice casting choices like Chris Pratt, as well as the guy who voiced Cranky Kong, but I think for the most part, the other voice casting choices were pretty spot on, especially Jack Black as King Bowser. We can all agree he just nailed it, and you can tell just how much fun he was having with that role. Princess Peach was a real badass, which some may argue was a little derivative of its source material, like why wasn't she kidnapped, but maybe that would have been a little too predictable and cliche, and I'm glad they took that chance. All the Easter eggs were great. Maybe a little too many, and of course, being that this topped the box office, of course it's going to get a sequel, which was hinted during the post-credit scene. So I'm looking forward to the future of this franchise and seeing what Illumination can do with it. So, in the words of Mario, let's-a go! Number 7, Fast X. Yeah, I anticipated it for 2023, and I didn't know what to really expect, especially after the rather disappointing F9, or Fast and Furious 9, whatever you would call it. And thankfully, it was much better improved. I was surprised with most of the casting choices. John Cena did his part really good, as well as Vin Diesel, who also makes a return, alongside Michelle Rodriguez, Charlize Theron, yay, remember the antagonist from the last couple of movies, as well as Captain Marvel Brie Larson. And even Jason Statham makes a couple of appearances as Shaw. Yeah, that was to be expected if you've seen the last film's mid-credit scene. But the one that really stands out and is the most entertaining in this entire film is Jason Momoa as the main antagonist. I mean, wow. He is just so hilarious and over the top, but man, he's just such a joy to watch in every scene. I mean, you could tell just how much fun he's having on the set of this movie. There were lots of surprises, lots of cliches and predictable moments, as well as some really far-fetched stuff, like the bomb going through the city, moving around like a freaking wrecking ball. Okay, I know. There's plenty of far-fetched stuff throughout this entire franchise. What more do you expect? It's entertainment right there, people. And of course, it sets up for another sequel. And yeah, there's even a mid-credit scene, which I wouldn't dare give away, setting it up for it, as well as a real surprise appearance at the very end of this movie before the credits start. So yeah, if you didn't like F9, give this one a watch. You might think it's at least an improvement. It's not the best in the franchise, but it's definitely not the worst one. Number 6, Champions. Yes, a sports movie that I did not know when I went to see this one in theaters was actually a remake of another movie, which is sort of the same concept and plot and everything like that. And it's sort of like a Mighty Ducks plot a little bit, with Woody Harrelson as our main star, playing an assistant basketball coach to Ernie Hudson's character, and gets himself into trouble with the law, especially, and is forced to do community service, which involves him having to coach a team of intellectual disabled basketball players. It seems a little formulaic, but it's enjoyable. Thanks to some great casting choices who play all of these basketball players, and Woody Harrelson himself is very well likable. There's definitely some sentimental moments in here, predictable stuff, some humorous stuff in here, and it's, a typical sports movie. Play your heart out and make it all the way to the end. And even at the end, too, it definitely pulls a few things that, well, make it a little predictable, but also throws in a little bit of a surprise at the end, which I wouldn't give away. So if you're into sports movies, which this one, again, may seem a little bit predictable and cliche, but I think it's very enjoyable, and Woody Harrelson, he makes it work. And for any of you who grew up during the 90s, you probably remember this catchy as hell song. Yeah. It's sung and mentioned several times throughout this film, including during the end credits, which I have to admit is a nice touch. So, yeah, whenever I hear that song, I think about this movie from now on. Number 5, Elemental. Yeah, we know. Disney has definitely had one of the worst year, or I should say last 2 years, have been very rough for them, especially with their animated movies. But I would say this one is the least terrible. Yeah. I anticipated it for 2023, and while I didn't go to see it in theaters, it didn't exactly get the best reception right off the bat, but over time it kind of grew on a lot of people. A lot of people were saying, give this one a watch. And I did when it made it to Disney Plus, and surprisingly, I didn't think I was going to like it. Even after seeing the trailer, I thought it looked rather generic and not very original, or more or less just not very interesting. I mean, the concept just seemed a little ridiculous and just not very engaging. But just give it a watch. After the first 20 minutes or so, you actually get very invested in these characters. It takes a concept that seems rather, formulaic too as well, and kind of plays on it. They're two opposites. One's fire, one is water. It more or less plays on puns with a lot of that kind of stuff. A little predictable, but it works. You know what you're going to expect. But surprisingly, this is probably the best Disney animated movie of the year. I hate to say it. So, I would definitely give it a watch. It's on Disney Plus. It's on Blu-ray. Go for it. Number 4, Totally Killer. Okay, most of you probably haven't heard about this movie. You might have seen the trailer, but probably haven't seen it because it was never released in theaters, at least to my knowledge. It was released straight to Amazon Prime, which is where I watched it. And it wasn't half bad. Yeah, for a slasher movie, okay, it's not the most original idea. It stars, of course, Sabrina actor Kiernan Shipka as our main character, and after her mother is brutally murdered and butchered by a group of killers wearing costumed faces, she has to go back in time using a time travel device in the form of a carnival photo booth and stop the killings from happening and uncover the killer. Again, may not seem like the most original idea, but it's familiar and fresh at the same time. Definitely expect some nostalgia considering she goes back to the 1980s. It has maybe a little too much swearing in it, but her performance is very believable. It definitely shows the whole thing in mentions of time travel and past and other films that we probably have seen before, and that's what makes it so entertaining. Yeah, it's got the typical stuff you see out of teenagers, what they do in high school. They party and go to cabins, and of course, it plays on those types of things. But at the same time, it's at least worth one watch. Again, not the most original idea, but I'll give them credit for playing on a different idea using the slasher movie genre in there. Because, yeah, we've seen plenty other slasher horror movies that have taken ideas from other films, like Freaky, for example. And I could definitely see why not many people have seen this one and turned it down. So, if you have Amazon Prime, give it a watch. Her performance is worth it, and the nostalgia and the humor and the blood definitely blend together pretty nicely. Number 3, Transformers Rise of the Beast. Yeah, I already reviewed this one, and I could safely say, simply put it, it's definitely a much better improvement, as I hoped for, over the other Michael Bay sequels, which the series that just went on and got ridiculous after a while, and we wanted a fresh new start. Yes, Bumblebee was a great new start, a reboot, not a prequel to the Michael Bay Transformers movies, even though, of course, he was one of several producers, and the same goes with this one. But thankfully, it's less Michael Bay-ish, and with the new Creed 2 director acting as the director for this film, he definitely gave it the nice new fresh start that it needed, taking place in 1994 with a similar concept, with the whole end of the world. And instead of the Decepticons, it's a new type of Transformer villain, which the visuals are great. You could argue there's a lot of annoying characters and too much focus on the humans, but when the Transformers are in there, it's awesome. Especially the ending sequence, and of course, well, okay, having a crossover with G.I. Joe, I'm not for it. I understand it's going by comics a little bit, but yeah. Again, a flawed but much better experience than the Michael Bay sequels, at least. Even though the first one I thought was really good, this one, I'd say is almost about on that level, if not maybe at some points even better. May not be more than meets the eye, but it's definitely worth a watch for die-hard fans of this franchise. Number 2, The Flash. Yeah, another one that I reviewed as part of a summer movies list of 2023, and I ain't got much more to say. I anticipated it, and I thoroughly enjoyed it for what it was. You got the actor back as the Flash. Yeah, the whole multiverse concept is a little bit tiring, but of course, we were all excited for one thing. Seeing Michael Keaton back as Batman. He was incredible in the Tim Burton movies, and I was just as ecstatic as ever to see him back on here as the Cape Crusader, being that, yeah, even though all odds were against him with the whole Mr. Mom thing, the petitioning, that people didn't want him to play him, but he kicked ass in those films, and he did pretty damn good in this film too. Again, some of the action is a little bit iffy, especially the third act might be a little bit not as strong as the first two acts of this film, and it does go on a little bit long, and all the Easter eggs in there as well, especially with the reference to Nicolas Cage Superman, which was ridiculous, but at the same time, the humor and charm, it definitely shines through. There's some sentimental moments that definitely carry the film and make it work. So, not a perfect DC comic movie, and I know DC comic films have had a rough year right next to Disney at the box office, and this one flopped pretty hard, which is kind of surprising, really. I mean, I'm not sure if the streaming is having an effect on it, but either way, this one is definitely not the worst DC comic movie. Yeah, there were much worse ones than this that I've seen, so this one, especially if you're a fan of the Tim Burton Batman movies, it deserves at least one watch. And the number one movie that I think is the most underrated of 2023 is Blue Beetle. Yep, from one DC comic movie to another. This one, I didn't really know what I was going to expect out of it, especially seeing a Latino cast taking place in, I believe, South America somewhere. Yeah, it's pretty obvious they're trying to go diverse with these movies. They did with Aquaman, casting a Polynesian actor. And that was smart because he did a great job, Jason Momoa to be exact, and this time they casted Latino actors to play this part. And yeah, it's a shame that this one flopped at the box office like most of these films did this year. DC comic movies, like Disney, did not have a very good year box office-wise, like I said before. But does that mean these movies are bad? Not really. So, this one should definitely be watched. I mean, yeah, the character, I didn't really know too much about it. He's part of a family that's hurting, and he's looking for a job, and of course, taking on a rather corporately greedy villain played by Susan Sarandon, who I thought did a really good job. We've sort of seen this concept before, and, well, it's familiar and fresh at the same time. Of course, there's going to be a lot of CG in this, and a lot of quirky moments and everything like that, which are a little cringeworthy, but at the same time, you get a good laugh. And the characters are very well likable, especially our main character, and of course his girlfriend, and, well, the chemistry between the characters is there. Of course, the family sticks up for him, and that's really what the movie's about. He's trying to get rid of the whole Blue Beetle thing that takes over his body, and of course it gives him the power which he has to stop the main villain, and of course alongside her is her minion, and has some really good backstories behind it as well. The action, when it gets good, it is really good. I mean, you got a lot of explosions, and not only the Blue Beetle is the main hero, but also the family is too. All the gadgets are cool. You got a kick-ass soundtrack, especially the best part is with Motley Crue's Kickstart My Heart. Yeah, there's some silly stuff in here, and there's some sentimental moments too as well between, of course, our main character and his father during the whole near-death experience moment. And yeah, there's some sad moments that really stick to you and, of course, show the true character of what this guy is supposed to be. I don't know how true it is to the comic, considering I've never read it, but for a 2-hour runtime, I was thoroughly entertained, and I'm interested to see how a sequel will turn out. Of course, you probably all heard that the DCEU is getting completely rebooted. That's right, the last Aquaman movie that I saw, which was decent, is going to be the last one. This one, I'm not sure, is part of the whole thing, but if it isn't, that would be great if it would continue, but it is also unfortunate, but also kind of a good thing that we are getting a new director, James Gunn, who did a great job on the Suicide Squad reboot, even though, of course, Superman and all these other superheroes are getting completely overhauled. I'm hoping this one is part of that whole new thing, because, again, I'd love to see a sequel, being that there was a mid-credit scene that hints that. And yeah, that's all I could say there. The main character was great, the family, especially the grandma, who was badass. George Lopez was funny. So take it from me. Give it at least one watch. It definitely shows that the DC Universe, like any other, can show that it has diversity. So, an enjoyable good time. Check it out. Like I said, a film flops at the box office, it doesn't mean it's bad. Look at Shawshank Redemption. Look at several other films that have flopped in the past and were great. And look at the Michael Bay Transformers sequels. They were all trash. Fans hated them, but they made ton loads of money at the box office. So, take my word, people. See it and judge it for yourself. And that's why I consider it the most underrated movie of 2023. So, that's my list right there, people. Again, my opinion right there. And also I want to add that this is actually going to be my last time ever doing underrated movies lists of the end of each year. I'm still going to do best movies in video games and anticipated movies in video games, but for many reasons, which I can't really explain, this is going to be the last time. So enjoy it while you can. Again, it's just my opinion, but until next time, keep watching.